Hey, Retcon Raider here. Well, October has come and gone, and with it, the channel has actually hit another milestone or two. As hard as it might be to believe, I've now been doing this whole YouTube thing for roughly 18 months, though I've gotta say, it really feels like I've been doing this a whole lot longer. When I first started the channel last year, I really wasn't sure what to expect. After all, I come from a background in business and customer service, not broadcasting or multimedia entertainment. Sure, I like playing games, and of course I like talking about them, but that doesn't automatically equate to an entertaining or engaging gameplay video. Thankfully, despite my misgivings, it really has worked out much better than I had ever anticipated. I mean, don't get me wrong, it would have been nice to become an overnight sensation with 1 million subscribers by the end of my first year, but I'm pretty pragmatic. I never really expected that to happen, and even if it had, all that stress probably would have caused me to self-destruct. Anyway, despite my concerns, it turns out that YouTube really does have an audience for just about everything. While I'll certainly never hold a candle to any of the big gaming channels, or even the medium ones for that matter, I have managed to dig out a nice little niche for myself. That said, let's take a quick look at the numbers, and then we'll talk about the second milestone that we hit back in October. Now, sadly, the slow downward trend in the channel's growth did continue into October. According to the analytics, we pulled a total of roughly 131,000 global views and a net total of 668 new subscribers back in October. That's a pretty big drop-off from the numbers we saw back in September. In fact, proportionately speaking, that's just over a 50% decline in both categories. Under normal circumstances, that might actually be a little discouraging, but like I said, I'm pretty pragmatic. After 18 months of this, I've had plenty of time to study the numbers, and I've more or less gotten used to just how bumpy this whole YouTube thing can really get. After all, I started the channel just in time to get blindsided by the adpocalypse, then the second adpocalypse, the faulty demonetization bot, and I still came out just strong enough to avoid the mass demonetization event of early 2018. In this case, we do seem to be in the midst of yet another crisis, the Google Plus purge. That would be, what, the 5th YouTube crisis since I started the channel? Like I said, I'm really starting to get used to this stuff. Now, I'll admit, I don't really know much about this one, especially since YouTube tends to do their best to keep these crises as quiet as possible. From what I understand, it all stemmed from the decision to officially shut down Google+, which required hastily removing it from the YouTube infrastructure. Given just how heavily the two platforms were intertwined, it's no surprise that this caused all sorts of unanticipated problems, mostly related to the search and recommendation functions. While I'm not exactly sure how this affected the channel, it does seem to coincide with some odd gaps in our October analytics. And of course, I also had several people contacting me about how my videos were no longer appearing in their recommendation or subscription feeds. Although this did have a pretty obvious impact on our numbers throughout October, it wasn't quite enough to bring us to a complete standstill. In fact, not only did we still see some pretty respectable growth, but we also officially hit the channel's next major milestone, 10,000 subscribers. Wow, I mean, I'm not even sure what to say about that. Like I said before, when I first started the channel, I wasn't really sure what to expect, and that goes both ways, really. I wasn't expecting the channel to tank, but I don't think I ever really expected it to grow this much either. Honestly, in retrospect, I don't think I really thought this far ahead at all. Of course, that lack of planning has led to some pretty obvious problems, especially lately as I've started struggling with my release schedule. More than usual, that is. When I first started the channel, I was cranking out upwards of 20 videos a month, though I will admit the quality tended to be a bit all over the place. These days, I barely manage a dozen videos a month, and while I do like to think that the quality is much higher than what it used to be, that's still a lot of lost momentum. Now, part of the problem is that as I've learned more about making videos, I've started applying all sorts of new techniques and tricks to my recording and editing process. While that does generally result in a better overall video, it also tends to add on to the production time. And it's gotten to the point where a lot of these videos can take upwards of 6 to 8 hours to complete. It also doesn't help that, given my limited free time and slow rate of production, I've obviously spread myself a little too thin. I already touched on that last month, so I won't really repeat myself here, but suffice to say, the recent completion of my Battle Brothers series prompted me to take a step back and reevaluate the way I'm currently doing things. There are a ton of interesting games coming out on a constant basis, but I think it's become pretty obvious that it's impossible for me to keep up with them all. While I certainly haven't come to any hard decisions just yet, I did spend some time reading through all the feedback I got on last month's retrospective, and I think it's time for me to revise my current production queue. With that in mind, my current plan is to get back to the various ongoing series that helped build the channel in the first place. I'll obviously be continuing my ongoing Kingmaker series, especially given the recent release of the massive 1.1 update, as well as the upcoming batch of new DLC. But I'd also like to get back to my other various ongoing series as well, most notably Darkest Dungeon, which I think a lot of you have been disappointed to see grinding to a halt. I'd also like to continue my Battletech and Phantom Doctrine playthroughs as well, but I'll admit, those two are a somewhat lower priority. I do enjoy playing them, but they're also a lot harder to make videos about, so they're projects I'll work on in my spare time, but games like Kingmaker, Darkest Dungeon, and, of course, Phoenix Point will always take precedence. Similarly, I do plan on getting back to doing more lore videos as well. I just need to find a way to work on them between my other regularly scheduled videos, so they don't end up throwing my entire production queue off track. Now, that's not to say that I won't be covering new games, it just means that I'll have to be a lot more careful about how I approach them. For example, I've actually been playing Mechanicus in my spare time, and I'd love to do a new series about it, but let's be honest here. Even with Battle Brothers out of the mix, I've still got 4 other ongoing series to deal with. The last thing I need to do is start cluttering up my production queue with another long-term commitment. That said, going forward, I'll probably try to restrict myself to one-shot overviews and maybe the occasional short-run series, at least until I finish a few of my current ongoing projects. Once I've started wrapping a few of those up, then I can start looking at a new ongoing series. Maybe something new, maybe something old. At that point, I'll probably turn to you guys to get a better idea of what you'd like to see me cover. Oh, speaking of which, that does bring me to a game that I've ultimately decided not to cover, Fallout 76. Full disclosure, I've actually sunk more hours into the game than I'd care to admit, and I actually kind of enjoy it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a deeply, deeply flawed game, and Bethesda completely dropped the ball here. But you know me, I always try to focus on the most positive aspects of even the worst product. Besides, it gives me a chance to spend some time hanging out with a few of my friends and patrons during the increasingly rare moments when I actually get to relax and play a game for fun. What it really comes down to is this: I just don't like video game controversy, and Fallout 76 is just about the most controversial video game that's currently on the market. Sure, I could spend some time talking about it, but you can already find 1,000 other videos on YouTube that have dissected the game into 1,000 pieces, and I think it would invite the sort of drama that I just really don't want to deal with. Is it a good product? No, of course not. But it can be fun, especially if you're playing with friends, and if you stay focused on the more enjoyable aspects of the game. Personally, I find that I enjoy it most when I'm just hanging out with friends, exploring the wasteland, building overly elaborate bases, and poking fun at the particularly shoddy writing. I think this is the sort of game that I'd actually enjoy live streaming, if I were set up for that sort of thing, because I think it would make for some pretty relaxed viewing. The music is great, the atmosphere is halfway decent, and, well, it's basically the video game equivalent of hanging out with your friends and making fun of a bad movie. that actually brings me to one last thing I wanted to talk about before I wrap up this month's retrospective. I know I just said that I need to be more careful about how I approach new games, but I do have my eye on another upcoming turn-based tactical RPG. Namely, Mutant Year Zero: Road to Eden, which actually comes out next week. Not only is it a story-driven turn-based tactical RPG, but it also features a retro sci-fi post-apocalyptic setting that I find really appealing. I don't get to talk about it much, but I'm a huge fan of tabletop RPGs, and I also have a deeply rooted love for campy C-list sci-fi movies. To me, this game looks like XCOM meets Gamma World or Hell Comes to Frogtown, so I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on it. Of course, given what I just said, I'm not going to make a grandiose proclamation of an indefinitely ongoing series. Heck, I'm not even sure if I'll end up liking the game, though current signs seem to indicate that I will. Instead, I'll probably start off with a self-contained one-shot video about the game shortly after the official release. Then, if I really end up enjoying it and you guys want to see more, I'll consider turning it into a short-run series. Anyway, I think you've listened to me ramble enough for one day, and I've still got a lot of other projects in my current production queue, so I'd better get back to it. As usual, I'd like to close things out by giving thanks to you, the viewers, especially the 10,000 of you who actually liked my content enough to hit that subscribe button. And of course, I'd also like to give special thanks to the 40 people who are dedicated or just plain crazy enough to continue supporting the channel financially. While it's true that I'm now doing just well enough to guarantee a monthly paycheck from YouTube, it's still a pretty modest amount, and nowhere near what I would actually need to cover the channel's constantly growing overhead. That said, special thanks to my honorary raiders from October: Adam Hall, Austin Fagan, Brad Quinn, Dimitri Foster, James Tremere, Mark Richards, Midnight Sun, Pontus Lundberg, Purge, and Stepan Lovasic. And extra special thanks to my veteran raiders from October: Adriraven, Drakiith, Drunken Gunslinger, Forbidden One, IceApple23, Jonathan Tanner, Laura and Mike, Mildly Nuclear, Nazzul, Sir Skelibate, Takumson, Valinrook, and Woe77. Oh, and of course, honorary mention to Revenant and Rowan Church, my Raider Lord and Captain respectively. You guys are two of my biggest supporters, and I just want you both to know that I really appreciate it. Now, if anyone else would like to help support the channel financially, then feel free to check out the links to my Patreon or PayPal accounts in the description below. But, as usual, no pressure. I'm always happy for any support that you folks would like to offer, and it certainly does help. But at the same time, I don't want to push anyone outside of their comfort zone. No matter how you decide to support the channel, whether it's through a one-time donation, full-fledged patronage, or even just watching one of my videos and maybe hitting the like or subscribe button, it all adds up. Every single one of you has helped get the channel to where it is today, and as always, I'm eternally grateful for it. Anyway, this is Retcon Raider, signing off. Thanks for listening. Oh, and remember, if you need to contact me for any reason, you can do it through the comments section on any of my videos, or you can reach me through my Facebook page, my Patreon account, or my official email address. As always, links are in the description.